Hello, everybody, and welcome. Welcome to this panel discussion regarding emerging technologies and innovation. My name is Michele Di Paolo. I will be your host for the day. And together with me, of course, there is the fantastic team of the Digital Transformers Initiative, brought together by Salto Participation and Inclusion and Salto Diversity. And I'm going to introduce now the two voices from these Salto centers, Enrique Gonçalves and Kadri Maripu, which are here with us. And we're going to start the day, which is giving us our last panel discussion in this long ride of moments of exploring different dimensions and different perspectives in the digital transformation of youth work. So, Kadri and Enrique, here's to you.
Okay. Thank you, Michele, and hi, everyone. So once again, here's Enrique from Salto Inclusion and Diversity, and I'm very excited to welcome you all on behalf of the organizing team of the Digital Transformers project. So we reached the sixth and last panel discussion in our webinar series. This has been a wonderful, eye-opening journey where we have been looking at digital inclusion and digital participation from many perspectives and topics, some of them not so present in the field of international youth work. So today we look at the emerging technologies, which is quite big, hot topic, quite new and unexplored topic in our field. For us, this is something that when it comes to digital with emerging technologies, something that comes with a lot of possibilities, but also with a lot of implications. We see that on one hand, these technologies are giving possibilities to reach out to certain young people that wouldn't normally take part in face-to-face activities when you think about rural youth, for example, or the gamers community. But on the other hand, some of these environments are not designed for learning, or specifically not designed to target marginalized young people. So we'd like also to hear what are the implications and how this revolution is affecting notions such as personal identity or participation, citizenship, and what's the role of youth work in that. So really looking forward to learning more about these issues from our speakers today. But before, I would like to give the floor to my dear colleague, Kadri.
Thank you, Enrique. And from my side as well, welcome to everyone to this last session where we discuss the emerging technologies. And as Enrique mentioned, this has been a long journey. Just before the panel started, we remembered that on the first session we called in from Armenia. And now in 3 weeks, we also end this project because it's also accompanied by a training to youth workers. We will also end it in Armenia. So the cycle is full. And if you would like to, if you're new to this panel, then you can also explore the previous sessions in the Facebook and YouTube of Salto P and Salto Inclusion and Diversity, where we can also discuss more on rights and ethics and sustainability and inclusion and participation in more focus. And today we are focusing more on the emerging technologies and the inspiration of them, what could be used in youth work. And it is very exciting topic for me as well, because in 2021 and 2022, we did a research, a mapping and gapping exercise in resources and tools available for digital transformation in European youth field, and we realized that the emerging technologies or the resources that are covering emerging technologies are the most lacking. So there is the biggest gap. So really excited to hear now from our panelists as well on what they have done, what they see, but also from you. So do please share. And with this last panel, we are also giving a torch fully over to Salto Digital. And Juha is also joining this panel discussion and introducing their plans for the future in the end of this panel. So keep yourself involved, and you can see what they have planned for the future in developing this topic further. And in any case, I hope you will enjoy, and back to Michele.
Thank you, Kadri. Thank you, Rick. I also want to mention the rest of the team, which is here behind the curtain, taking care of all the technical aspect and the connection with our audience. So Maja Drobne and Laimonas Ragaukas. And also we have, as usual, a graphic recording in process. And with us, we also have our graphic recorder for the day, Dace Anderson. So Dace, hello and welcome back. Your iPad is ready, so we are also ready to see what is going to be the graphic recording of the discussion. And in the end, we will get back at you to have a sneak peek of your production before then, of course, sharing the final and full recording through our digital channels. We, from our side, are going to discuss this with a very interesting group of people, which I'm now going to introduce one by one, starting from Irina Buzu. Irina is passionate about information technology, innovation, art, and artificial intelligence. She's pursuing her Ph.D. research in international law with a focus on AI policies and regulation. She's part of the European AI Alliance, and she's a fellow at the Center for Artificial Intelligence and Digital Policy and an emerging tech fellow at EUROPULS, where she makes studies about the intersection between algorithmic decision-making, ethics, and public policy, aiming to understand and explore the functioning of the technology that enables automated algorithmic decision-making and how such technology shape our worldview and influence our decision. Together with Irina, we will have Juha Kiviniemi. Juha is a digital youth work and digital education expert, currently working as senior advisor in the newly formed Salto Digital Resource Center. Juha is also a professional in his happy place whenever policy and practice need bridging, and enjoys advocating for better strategies, policies, support, and practice for all things digital in the field. Whenever he's not working, he's probably in his workshop tinkering with technology and crafting with leather or spoiling his cat. And also we will have with us Barry Hohi, the founder of Hologen. Barry is a digital artist and educator with over 20 years working in the UK and Irish education and youth work sectors. Throughout his career, he has worked with a diverse range of harder-to-reach young people, striving to incorporate digital learning and future skills into his programs. Over the past 4 years, Barry has been exploring and incorporating immersive technology, such as virtual reality, VR, into his educational and youth work practice using a range of multi-user platforms. Welcome, the three of you. As usually, I would start with the first round, sharing the same question for the three of you. So we are here discussing emerging technology, innovation with an eye and a perspective on the youth field. I would like to ask you, first of all, how would you define the innovation in the youth field and what it had or has to do with emerging technologies of any kind? I would say I would leave the floor as a starter for the discussion, maybe to Juha.
The way I see it is we often in the youth field, we do not innovate actual technology, but rather we innovate and reinvent youth work practice constantly, often based on a new and emerging technology. Now, new and emerging for the youth field is maybe something different often than for society, or especially the technology field, which is far ahead from the youth field in terms of innovation. I would say an emerging technology from the youth point field of view is something that is not used yet, at least in a widely adopted way in the field. I mean, it might be QR codes or NFC chip, which is something already existing for quite a while, or it might be AI that's really making a breakthrough in the mainstream. But whatever kind of prompts the reinvigoration and reinvention of youth field and youth work practice, then that would for me be this innovation in the youth field.
Thank you very much, Juha. I want now to ask Irina to come in and to help us widen this definition, of course, for starting from her perspective. Please.
Yeah, thank you, Michele. And I would like, well, basically to second everything that you has just said, but also to me, I guess the intersection between emerging tech innovation and how that gathers around youth work can be defined as sort of like the integration of cutting edge technologies or like tech tools and practices aimed to enhance and transform youth work in ways that would foster innovative outcomes. And here I think about emerging tech such as AI or VR that we're going to talk about today. AR also, blockchain, IoT. All of these basically have the potential to sort of revolutionize the way youth work is done. They can be used to engage young people, facilitate learning and skills development. They can also enhance social and emotional well-being. And basically, like, this is how all of these three areas interact to me.
Thank you very much. Now let's get to Barry. Do you agree, Barry? Do you want to add something? Do you have your own definition and perspective on the relationship between innovation, emerging technology, and youth work? We are curious. Please let us know.
Absolutely. And thank you for the opportunity today. Good afternoon to everyone. For me, I think it's kind of looking at where young people are and matching it to where we are in terms of this digital revolution that we've spoken about already. It doesn't take too much to understand that some of the digital platforms that we might talk about today are gathering millions of users every single day. So when we look at it from a youth working context, I suppose for me, it's a very fundamental question around where are the young people and are we there? So, that would kind of underpin a lot of my work over the last few years, is kind of looking at the digital trends with young people who I would have been working front-face youth working with, and maybe kind of allowing myself a little bit to look slightly ahead of the curve. And that's perhaps where immersive technology such as VR comes into the conversation. So I think it's a very quickly evolving area for sure. And where we will be perhaps in a year, 2, 3 years is going to be very different than where we are now. But I do think for me, a very easy way to continue that evolution is to look at digital trends and where young people are at the current time.
Thank you very much. Also, thanks to Milan, who is sharing in the comment another example of interesting practice of connecting voluntary events to vouchers for certain gifts through digital platforms, so as a way to create a circulation between voluntary engagement in the community and giving back from the community to the volunteers. And that's, of course, also including badging systems, which are another interesting elements to be spoken about in terms of innovation in the field. Also, another comment stepping in by Sergio is mentioning augmented reality, so AR, to foster immersive and engaging learning environments. Very interesting. But then after a while, the platform simply disappeared because the company behind it decided to discontinue it. So that's another part of the discussion. So we are relying on tools and platforms which are offering us interesting services, but then we are putting ourselves in their hands, and the system sometimes stops to work just when we found the interest and the way to make it useful for our practices. But talking about practices, I would like now to move a step forward and to go a bit more into your different areas of expertise, and asking you a bit more direct and precise questions from that point of view. I would start from Irina. We heard about your interest and commitment to exploring artificial intelligence, AI. So honestly, in the previous panel, we already spent quite some time discussing AI issues connected with digital rights and ethics at that time. But I think many of us could agree that artificial intelligence, so-called artificial intelligence, is one of the emerging technologies these days. Since you've been active on this topic since quite a while, how do you think this could bring a real innovation in the youth field? Not focusing on the fact that we are using AI because it's now the talk of the town, okay? But try to focus on what of this technology, how this technology could bring a real innovation in the field. I would be very curious to hear some hints and descriptions or ideas or practices from you regarding this topic. So I'll give the floor to Irina.
I mean, artificial intelligence is already here. We use it every day, whether we are conscious of using it or whether we aren't conscious enough. Just a basic example would be having our phones, which are embedded with a bunch of AI algorithms. Some of them collect various types of data. We use them to basically make our lives easier, starting with calculating and searching on the internet for, or having a specific tailored feed on the social media, tailored specifically to our needs. But largely, when kind of thinking about the youth work and how artificial intelligence can be used in this field, I think there's a bunch of ways in which AI tools or AI powered tools can be used to support and enhance work done with young people and the youth sector. One potential use would be to use AI in youth work in order to personalize learning and to support young people, especially those who come from marginalized groups. This would work by analyzing like a young person's interests, their learning style, their progress. And in this way, an AI algorithm can suggest tailored learning activities, resources, and various kind of interventions that would match that person's individual needs. Other examples of how AI can be used to enhance the field of youth work would be to kind of help youth workers to better understand the needs and experiences of young people, again, by analyzing very large data sets of demographic data, behavioral, and also social data. This could inform the youth worker on the development and of policies and of interventions that are more responsive to the needs of young people. However, as you've also mentioned, it is very important to note that while AI, of course, has the potential to enhance and transform youth work practices, it should always be used in an ethical and responsible way, with a focus on maximizing the benefits of young people while minimizing the potential risks associated with that. And therefore, it is very crucial to ensure that AI-based interventions are developed in collaboration with young people, with a strong focus on transparency, privacy, and user control. But also here, I would like to add that if you tailor these these AI tools to the youth work sector, it is also very important to involve in the process of development, deployment, and training the AI algorithms, not just the young people, but also the youth workers, because they aren't usually one of the stakeholders who is invited to the table. And whenever you have this process of development, training, and deployment, you have to have a multi-stakeholder approach to each step of the way of the AI cycle. So I believe that if we had young people and youth workers involved throughout the entire cycle, we would be able to develop as a society, as a global society, more inclusive and also better tailored AI tools that could help also marginalized groups, young people with special necessities, as well as young people who maybe don't have enough access to technology. And in this way, artificial intelligence powered tools could be used in a more ethical, but also in a more meaningful way, especially in the youth field.
If I may just quickly jump on one thing you mentioned, so the thing that systems like artificial intelligence should be developed also hearing the voice of the youth field. This is something which has been already proposed somewhere and discussed in a few circuits. And the big question there is always how to get there where these processes are happening. So I would like maybe, if possible, to quickly ask you to share some hints to give us all to how to get there where these kind of decisions are taken and how we could make our voice heard at that level.
Well, the easiest way to do is to participate in public consultations whenever some policy documents or draft proposals for legislative amendments are made, either by the European Commission or the European Parliament. For example, all of those are published on the official of the official institutions' web pages. So, and you can also click. I think on the European Commission website there is a button that allows you to get notified whenever a new proposal is put forward for public consultation. So this would be a way to also follow, but also be able to contribute to the policy and regulatory proposals that the European member states have. In terms of artificial intelligence, also another way to do that would be to kind of go way round and to build communities of youth workers who would have policy proposals and then have that document put forward to either the European Commission or other regulatory bodies for them to be able to kind of see that there is an initiative coming in from the sector, and then they would include the sector representatives at the negotiations table or the consultations table whenever that happens.
Well, thank you very much. So the scale is European at least. So keep an eye on the process of open consultation that the Commission starts from time to time, as Irina mentioned, or also from the field, there are possible initiatives. Before going on with the questions, I see that, of course, this topic is very inspiring, and so there's a lot of insight to share. I guess also Juha have some recommendation or hints anyway to share about this very thing. So I'll briefly pass the floor to him before going on with the questions to you all. Juha, please.
The youth partnership between the Council of Europe and the EU is running a research project on artificial intelligence and the youth field. And there, one of the research papers is exactly confirming this, that youth organizations are not really participating in these regulatory processes, whether it's an issue of capacity, whether it's an issue of not being invited, or whether it's an issue of not just being interested. I don't know which is the case, but in any case, it would be very important to get more youth voices out there into all of this process as well.
Thank you very much. Now let's go on to explore the different practices and how the different technologies you are using are bringing innovation in your practices of youth work. I'm now moving to Barry. Barry, you spent quite some time experiencing VR and immersive technologies, which to me is for sure another of the big things happening right now, or maybe waiting to happen, because there's been a lot of developing in this sector for a long time. So let's try to jump a little bit in the near future, guided by you, to ask you how would this kind of technology affect youth work in the upcoming time?
Indeed, it's an exciting time for youth work and emerging technology, and certainly my research and experience in immersive environments and youth work to date has been very encouraging in terms of what we can do as a wide region and use virtual reality and other technologies like virtual reality for youth participation. I'll go back a little bit really and kind of talk a little bit about what exactly VR is, just for those who might just be fully aware. So I'm talking about multi-user platforms, and multi-user platforms that are underpinned by three kind of guiding questions for youth work. One, that they're multi-user. Two, that you can create private events within those multi-user experiences. And three, that they're appropriate. So the good news there is, at the moment, we probably have about 16 to 20 multi-user platforms that are kind of road tested for youth work at the moment. I would say in the next 18 months to 2 years, we're probably going to have double that. And I think going forward, it's just going to triple as well very, very easily. So multi-user platforms, what is that? What can we do there? So when I use the term multi-user platform in immersive technology such as VR, it comes with a lot of different titles, a lot of different activities, everything from learning how to DJ, graffiti, multi-user graffiti experiences, sculpting in VR, and indeed creating immersive VR youth spaces where young people who are not physically in the same location can drop into a youth-hosted or youth work-hosted environment where very, very quickly what I've experienced is those groups become connected to a youth worker or youth workers and their peers, and it feels very real to a real youth club that might be happening, or a real youth conversation that might be happening in a physical space. So going forward, I think it's a really exciting time. What we could start to do and incorporate into youth work would be pan-EU events. We could also look at events where we could have different countries, for example, different young people, different panels hosting different conversations, all within a multi-user platform or lobby, learning lobby, whatever we might want to call it. So it's kind of looking at where the technology is now and how we can kind of evolve with that as youth workers going forward. And that's what's already started to happen. So there would be a little bit of work around staff onboarding and upskilling for sure. But I can promise you, once we get to a certain point in proficiency as a youth worker or an educator in VR, your skill set flips very, very easily into that environment and you become very natural. And that's kind of where the magic happens, I suppose, in many ways. So going forward, I suppose things to think about is where firstly young people are. I'm going to use an example of Roblox, which is coming to VR this year. Roblox at the moment has 53 million daily users. And that's globally, and I think it's got over 250 million accounts that are regularly used. That is just one platform that is popular with young people at the moment. If we added in all of the other popular platforms, I think it doesn't really bear talking about where we need to be or where we need to be thinking about being in the coming years. In addition to that, I think we're at a very exciting junction as well, where young people could be actually building their youth spaces, their virtual youth spaces. And youth workers will be the guests to those spaces. I think that's a really exciting place that we are on the cusp of being able to prototype in the coming, I would say in the coming year, we could prototype that. The last thing I would really point to is looking at kind of historically overlooked regions and young people who would be placed and living and residing in those places. I think immersive technology now offers the huge opportunity to look back and bring in young people who have been left out of the conversation for reasons because of where they live or an additional challenge in their lives. I think this technology, when we get to the point where we have a pan-EU network of skilled educators and youth workers that can use it proficiently, we can start to really bring in a proper gradient and demographic of all young people from all regions across this wide region.
Thank you very much, Barry. Yeah, there's a lot of things which are part of the ongoing conversation regarding, youth work and digital youth work and innovation and digital transformation in youth work, in what you said and in what was heard also before. So the idea of going where young people are. So this last news about Roblox going VR, it's very interesting news for a lot of people using also, for instance, video games as an educational tools, and so on. So my last step now in this part of our discussion will be approaching Johan and asking him a direct and personal question. You've been experimenting and experiencing youth work and technology connections since a long time. You had a publication regarding the maker's perspective in youth works and many more. Now you are, as we heard before, the senior advisor of the new Salto Digital. So of course, I can't help joining these two identities of you together and asking you to help us connecting the dots between these two dimensions. So how all these innovative experimentations, attempts, practices, and so on could become something more structured, something which help develop policies, models, and also on the other side, how we could support this process.
As I mentioned in my presentation of myself, that my happy place is between policy and practice, and that's kind of where this kind of my statements will lie as well. I'll start from the top. I'll start from policy, even if, like Barry said, the practice is where the magic happens, but there's a lot of things that need to happen before the magic can happen, so to speak. Yeah. So I feel like there needs to be a lot of policy and a lot of strategic thinking around re-innovating youth work practice before it can really become commonplace and become the part of the daily youth work curriculum. There is already a lot of, I think, really interesting stuff and interesting kind of culture shift happening around this experimentational culture in youth work, but it's not always very strategic, in the sense that we are experimenting with cool technologies, we are experimenting with interesting approaches, but we really struggle with how to move that into long-term practice in youth work. An interesting example of a policy framework like this is the Digital Education Action Plan. Now, if someone from the youth field is wincing a bit in the audience, this is indeed for the youth field as well, even if it's called education. I know that a lot of us don't feel that the identity of educators is for us, but I think we are indeed non-formal educators in the youth field as well. So it's very much relevant for us as well. And it contains these kind of interesting things that help us also foster this culture of innovation. For example, it calls for better infrastructure, that it needs to be there. And some technological approaches just simply need that infrastructure as well. Also, the Digital Education Action Plan, as well as many other policy initiatives, they contain funding instruments, which are crucial for actually developing youth work practice, which often happens in projects. And these policies and these programs have those instruments in place as well. I mentioned the Digital Education Action Plan, but also the Council conclusions on digital youth work are a good starting point. They give a really good framework of how digital youth work can be approached. Now, the other thing when going down the ladder is, of course, this organizational culture. Like, does our actual working environment really allow us to experiment or not? And that really comes from what the policy is calling for, and that is what the organizations will, in a way, implement. Not directly, of course, there are local considerations and context to consider, but it all trickles down from the policy. Yeah. So we need to figure out within our own organizations, how do we foster the kind of culture that really encourages this kind of strategic experimentation, so that we develop better practice that really can go into the organizational practice in the long run. So we are not in the situation that when someone like Barry, for example, decides to change jobs, all the good VR practice goes with him because no one else is doing it. It's just this one guy, whether it's Barry or Irina or Michele or myself. Yeah, so it needs to be really in the day-to-day bread and butter of the things. And one tool for that is there are several guidelines out there for organizations. There are newer frameworks, there are older ones, like from my previous employer Verke, that really look at how the organizational structures and strategies and cultures can be developed so that it really fosters this kind of innovation. Well, of course, to experiment, we need to kind of know what we're doing. Not all the way. Experimentation is always about really jumping into the unknown as well, but it can be helped a lot by having the competences to kind of have the grasp of the big picture, what we are experimenting on. And the snack on digital youth work, which has been an initiative of 16 different European states, has come up with a part of the output of that project is by our lovely Estonian colleagues, has been a framework of digital competences in youth work as well. So there will be tools and kind of frameworks to evaluate, do we have the competences to figure out new exciting practice or not? But finally, it's about where the magic happens. So it's about the practice. I believe it's a question of whether we can really examine critically what we are doing, if we are open to actually reinventing and innovating it, and do we really have that shared understanding of what it is that we are doing? I think partially COVID showed that even if we felt that we know what we are doing in our daily youth work practice, often the case might be that we thought we have a shared understanding, but all the practitioners around that practice kind of had a different idea of what it is that we're doing. And likewise, when transferring practice to a digital environment and an online environment, the question that came up often was, well, what are your actual goals that you're trying to do? And figuring that out gives us a much better starting point at all this experimentation when we are clear on the goals and values that we have. Now, a really good, again, shout out to my former employer, Verke, a really good material for innovating practice is InnoBox. That is a free and open source material for really kind of ripping apart your lovely youth work practice and figuring out how to do something cool with it. I highly do recommend that. Now, finally, I must mention research, because research should be around all these kind of steps along the way, and looking at practice also, impact evaluation and proper research on the topic, so that can in turn inform policy, so we can start the cycle again.
Thank you very much. Starting maybe from Juha, but I'm very interested in hearing also from the rest of you. Damian says, a lot of different educational platforms, or in a way practices, including emerging technologies and innovation, are implemented, for instance, through European funding or European projects. And this is something we also discussed inside our training course, Digital Transformers. And sometimes these projects have very bad, let's say, sustainability. Because at the end of the funding and the end of the project is the end of the practice. So this could be an interesting question also to bring up and to ask the three of you, how this innovation, experimentation could find a way to being developed and kept alive when the funding is over, when a project arc is going to conclusion. So how to bring on what we are doing in terms of emerging technologies and innovation in youth work. This is the question I'm picking up from Damian, and maybe making a bit wider and asking back to the three of you. Maybe, as I said, I will ask Juha to start. I'm very curious about also what Irina and Barry can then add to the answer. Please.
I think said it that when the project ends, the practice is over, but this really shouldn't be the case. I mean, project environments are where often new youth work practice developed, not only in digital youth work, but in other youth work approaches as well. And this is, in a way, unfortunate. Like, there are no sustainable funding schemes. I wish I had an answer like, yes, you can apply for this and then all will be better. But I would advocate more for focusing on practice. I mean, the way I see it is that project environments are really good for testing out new things, for experimenting, and for figuring out if a new practice is viable. But even if the funding goes away, and let's say in a digital sense, if that platform and that technology goes away, the practice shouldn't disappear. So I have a feeling that at least part of the reason is that if the practice goes poof every time projects ends, then we're actually been focusing on the technology instead of youth work practice. And it's maybe a question also of how do we build projects, like instead of focus on a singular approach, it should be more about this meta level. What are the implications for youth work practice and how it can be implemented differently in case we don't have a funding model in place? Again, I wish there would be a sustainable funding model in place. It would be handy, but I don't have an answer for that part.
Thank you. Yeah, I know, of course, it's a tricky question. That's also why I wanted to hear from the three of you how things can anyway be brought forward, standing this situation. So I don't know if Barry or Irina have other... Yeah, Irina, please, ideas to share. Let's go.
Yeah, I mean, I work in project implementation every single day. So to me, the fact that certain platforms disappear once that the funding is over is sometimes an indicator that either the project wasn't very well thought of. I mean, at the point when you start to develop a product, you have to think about that. Obviously, if this is a European fund, it won't last forever. So we have to think how this product is going to be viable after the finalization of the implementation of the project itself. And one good idea to do is to, as our as Damon has said, is to implement a small business model within the product. So if this is a platform, some of the services that the platform offers could be made for money. Users could pay even a symbolic fee, like for $1, €1, or whatever, just in order to be able to sustain the viability of the platform itself after the funding of the project is over. And another very good idea is what you have said, is to have practices that complement the product itself, practices to use that product. And if the funding is over, then the practices are still there in place. It's like a TOT. People are using the practice to spread it to other people who might find it useful, and that's how the platform remains alive throughout and even outside the cycle of the funding of the project. So yeah, that would be my input for this.
Thank you very much, Irina. Maybe everybody wants to add something?
Sure, I would just, I suppose, add to that as well, and kind of look at, I suppose, being multifaceted in terms of how many platforms that are being used, perhaps. If one kind of ceases to exist, for example, there are other options, and the learning and the skill set and the work and everything that has been done can carry over to other platforms going forward. So I suppose just placing everything on one platform is maybe not a good way to begin a project. And I suppose in addition to that, I think it should be underpinned by I suppose a core of digital youth work should be able to kind of pivot and adapt and evolve into other platforms if one does cease to exist, or indeed it might become less popular. I think it's something that should be at the forefront of any project before it begins.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Also, thank you very much to the three of you for this on-spot answers, which are somehow highlighting a kind of a red thread going through also the previous discussions that we had in other panels, tackling topics like sustainability, which also was a part of the training course we are also realizing under the big title Digital Transformers. It seems that part of the way to grow innovation and keep track of emerging technologies in youth work is actually doing things in the proper way and think forward also in terms of sustainability and inclusion and diffusion of practices, which is something that should always be part of youth work. And it proves once again that we are still anyway talking youth work when we talk about the digital transformation of youth work. And talking about youth work, there is a comment and a question by Francesca, which was already at least partially answered, but I want anyway to pick it up. She was asking, how can I become a technological educator? What I have to study, to experiment, to start? So the answer we provided already was, of course, to dive into the materials of Salto Toolbox and the training calendar, offering any sort of trainings for youth workers and trainers, and look at the resources in the participation pool regarding emerging technologies and so on. But let's also open up the question to the three of you. So what should a youth worker willing to do a first step or the first steps into this field of becoming a technological educator, which is a very wide and vague definition. We maybe use the technical definition of digital youth worker, which has been more like established in the European discussion about this, but still, which could be the approach, the background to build, the first steps to take to start this path. Also, maybe sharing which were your first steps and which was your background to get where you are now and to get doing what you are doing now. I see Barry nodding a lot, so I would maybe him to start answering, and then we see if other participants have more answers to share. Please.
Thank you. I suppose for me, the journey happened as an artist. I tried a VR headset maybe 4.5 years ago, and my mind as an artist was completely blown at this fully immersive 3D environment. And immediately after that, excitement sort of died a little bit. I got excited, re-excited as a youth worker and educator because I was thinking already about how this could work as if it was a multi-user experience. And that's where the kind of the spark happened. So for youth workers that are out there who might be interested in finding that spark, I suppose with immersive technology, there's already a growing range of different activities that you could incorporate into your own learning and upskilling. I'm going to use photography, for example. So finding something that you're interested in and then incorporating it into VR is something that could be a really good starting point, because you need that kind of interest to be able to use the technology and want to go back and kind of learn this in maybe a little bit of your own time. So using photography and 360 camera, you can import some of these images and some of this footage into fully immersive experiences, which as a photographer, a filmmaker, is really exciting. But if this was a project with young people, I think it could be really, really interesting in being able to kind of showcase work in a virtual space with other participants. So for me, I think the first steps in getting started would be maybe to access some equipment. I understand now libraries all across Europe would have access and be able to loan VR equipment. I'm not sure if you can actually bring it home with you, but I think a good stepping stone really before you actually purchase equipment would be maybe checking with your local library, seeing if you can have a go or a demo. And then just going from there, I think investing in a headset or two would be something as a next step. And I suppose just allowing yourself as a professional just to get familiar with the equipment, the basics, how to put it on, different kinds of experiences. Some are like 3D VR movies, but some actually you're interacting as an avatar. So there's a whole growing range of different experiences. But I suppose the takeaway really would be allow yourself a little bit of time to get familiar with being in an immersive environment. It could be a few weeks, it could be more than a month, just using the equipment little and often. And that's even before that's before we put our youth worker hat on, So yeah, there's a little bit of time investment. Find something that might be additional of interest, such as, for example, photography, sculpting. We can learn how to DJ, for example, I mentioned before. There's a growing list of really cool, really exciting, really fun, educational and youth-focused activities that we can now do using fully virtual, we physically could be in very different spaces. So that would be my take on that.
Thank you very much, Barry. Also including having fun, which I think it's also a big driver for this motivation that you were mentioning. And talking about this, I would also like to ask if Irina maybe wants to share her first step to what you're doing now, please.
Sure. I mean, to me, I feel like I sort of can relate to not being a tech educator, but being a tech lawyer, having the same prefix. I mean, to me, moving from a traditional legal practice to a more technical legal practice involved a lot of staying curious and wanting to learn new things. And to me, the first step was literacy, AI literacy in my specific case. And for this, I would very much suggest there is a free resource. It's called Elements of AI. This is a platform that has a series of free online courses created by the University of Helsinki in collaboration with a startup. I think it's called Mina Learn. And what they do, they want to encourage a broad group of people as much as possible to learn what AI is, what can and cannot be done with artificial intelligence, and how to start creating AI methods. It's a both theoretical and practical course, so I would really, really recommend to start from there if everyone is curious to learn about artificial intelligence and to kind of dip their toe into this whole thing. And other than that, so you kind of go from there. Once you are literate enough, and if you stay curious enough, you want to learn more, and then you start practicing, going in from theoretical to practical. If you want to narrow it down to a specific domain that you practice, in this case being youth work, you start researching for tools that are specifically tailored for youth work. In my case, would be for lawyers, and so on. And that's how you kind of move from a traditional standard of your profession to a technical upgrade of your profession, I guess.
Thank you very much, Irina. Because we are now approaching this question that came from Francesca, and this is showing us that there are elements that we should always remember that are maybe more in the background. So following your own interest or trying to follow some online learning processes or courses and so on. Then I'm asking also to Juha, either which were your first steps, I'm very curious about this, but also again, some help to connecting the dots and to make it more visible how indeed dealing with emerging technologies and innovation in youth work and in digital youth work even more, it's very much about don't quit your own maybe strange or geeky interest and find a way to make them work for the good of young people you're working for, or as a way to address your practice to more young people, as we were mentioning in the beginning, which are already using these practices on their own, and maybe they can also take some value by having some educational figure closer to them. But I'm curious to hear from you and your perspective, Juha.
Yeah, well, for me personally, it was always a no-brainer to get into digital youth work in the sense that I've always been a huge geek and a huge nerd. But that can also feel like an exclusive thing. I get it that digital youth work can sometimes feel like something that's only for this like boys nerd club or even girls nerd club. And if I'm not a nerd, then I never will be included because I'm not interested personally in technology. But we are interested in a lot of things, like a bit of like what Barry and Irina both said, that to quote, I believe, Charles Bukowski, the famous quote goes, "Find what you love and let it kill you." Of course, don't let work kill you in any sense, but find what you love is, I think, resonating here in the sense that so many things can be connected to digital youth work practice, whether it's music or arts, or if you're really interested in human rights issues or safe spaces for advocacy. All of this can be kind of a starting point for digital practice. So for someone asking like, how can I become a digital educator, just take the thing that you're passionate about in your work or in your daily life and start connecting that with digital youth work. The way I got kind of started in my path to where I am now, in a way, is the thing that I always say to students asking the same question is find the people that are doing cool stuff and play with them as much as you can. This includes a lot of people in this panel potentially as well, but include for me, as for example, nationally, my ex-colleagues in Bergen. So I worked with them a lot in my previous positions, even when I wasn't still a part of the staff, because, hey, they're doing cool stuff. So I want to learn from them and I want to kind of interface with what they are doing and develop my own competence from there. One thing I would add maybe is to really consciously develop a mindset. It goes back to this experimentation as well, that apart from organization having to allow us to experiment, we also have to allow ourselves to experiment, and we have to allow ourselves to fail, because we have this kind of mentality sometimes that we have to be experts before we can even try. But I always have a quote from the snowboarding world: if you're not falling down, you're not trying hard enough. So the only way the practice and our personal competence will develop is that we push the limits, we push the boundary and keep experimenting, even if we set ourselves up to fail. I've said also that there should be a European, maybe this is a connecting a dot, but there should be a European fund for semi-controlled failure. So if like a project fund where if you fail, but you can show why you failed and what you learned, you would get more funding on the next round. So something like this would really kind of foster a culture of experimentation and failure. So those are my, not 2 cents, but few cents.
Yes, thank you very much. We are now moving towards the end of our discussion. We are already like anticipating some elements of what I wanted to ask you as a final question, which is indeed to share ways, tips, recommendation, attitudes, behaviors, and everything can help us to build a confidence toward innovation and using of emerging technologies in youth work practices. So as I said, it's not for the sake of showing off new gear itself or having the last gadget or geeky stuff, but indeed how innovation through emerging technologies in youth work can, from one hand, become a part of what you do. And we already had a few hints from you on that side. And so if you have more, please feel free to share more. And on the other hand, how these approach of using emerging technologies to improve the experiences we are offering to young people could then become to a general transformation of the sector. So how this could become somehow a way to showcase a possibility to make your own way towards new practices, which maybe now are even yet to be invented, but can come because of these attitudes, of these approaches that you are developing step by step. So any recommendation, hints, advice on that level would be probably very valuable from the three of you, and we are really all ears. I would maybe ask Irina to start, and then we can follow on with the rest of you.
Well, apart from what we've already said about trying to experiment with online learning tools, such that would help you, first of all, get literate with the new technologies and the emerging technologies. When I'm thinking about specifically AI-powered tools targeted or tailored for the youth sector and the youth workers, I would think about the kind of tools that resemble like chatbots or virtual assistants. They could kind of provide support, for example, to young people 24/7 in relation to various situations that they might encounter. Also, youth workers could use adaptive learning platforms, and these platforms, what they basically, these are platforms that are powered by AI algorithms and that can personalize learning activities and resources to specifically targeted young people based on their individual needs and learning styles. Also, the basic would be to use data analytics tools. As I've said in the beginning, like these are tools that can by default analyze very large data sets of demographical, behavioral, social data. And some examples that I've tested and that I could recommend are Squirrel AI. This is a adaptive learning platform that uses AI algorithms to personalize those learning activities to young people. It has some features that are free of cost and others that are that you have to pay for. But the personalization aspect of the platform is really, really cool. And I would suggest to at least try to test it to see how that could be used to tailor your work. Another one would be AI for All. And this is this is an organization, and they aim to increase diversity and inclusion in the field of artificial intelligence. What's curious about them is that they provide AI education and mentorship programs to young people from underrepresented backgrounds, helping them to sort of develop the skills and knowledge needed to succeed in the AI industry. So this is an interesting platform to use, especially if someone either comes from an underrepresented background or they live in a remote region and they are curious and they want to have the magic happen. And this would be a tool for them to use to try to get a mentorship program from someone who is already skilled and experienced in the field. And another platform that I would recommend is Cogni. This is also an AI kind of powered platform that provides interactive and personalized learning experiences for young people. I live in Moldova, and this platform is very much used here by youth workers and educators who try to do alternative learning. It's very interesting how the platform generates various tools to enhance learning experiences for the various youth groups, age groups, social groups, and so on and so forth. So if any of those three would be useful to anyone who is listening to us today, I would very much encourage you to use those. Yeah. And stay curious as always.
Thank you very much. let's go on sharing ideas, recommendations, hints, and tips. Maybe it's time again to go to Barry and hear from him.
Okay, yeah, it's a really nice part of this conversation that I can kind of share some of the existing activities that have been incorporated into youth work here in Ireland, and indeed with some of my more recent work with the youth groups I'm working with in the Åland region of Finland. Shout out to everybody over there. It's a great pleasure to work with everyone in that jurisdiction. But what I've found in the last few years is looking at how we can use fully immersive events. So no one is physically in the same space, open a multi-user event, and we can start kind of looking at how young people can shape and build their own worlds. Another huge interesting area within young people of the groups that I've been hosting over the last few years is building and creating and designing their own avatars. Which we find, which is a really, it's a really vibrant part of the conversation that you will find actually in a 30 to 40 minute call or a meetup, sorry, in VR. You might find that young people tend to change their avatar several times, which as a youth worker, it can be quite challenging to keep track of who is who and who is what character at any given time. But again, it's the way of the world at the minute, and certainly it's how young people are choosing to kind of communicate and interact with each other, and it's really exciting. So looking at world building, virtual world building, you know, again, I mentioned Roblox, but we also know that Minecraft is hugely popular, and I do hear that Minecraft may be coming to VR experiences in the near future also. But looking at also the gamification, you know, how we can be digital citizens in VR and how we can interact. And what I've also found here in Ireland is that young people who may not perhaps invest in a youth activity in a physical space, maybe a little bit open to something like mindfulness within VR context, which again, within boys, for example, I think there's a huge value to that, where, you know, we're looking at a growing demographic of young people who are online, but who are maybe more open to the idea of a 5-minute mindfulness kind of routine and focusing on breathing. I think there could be something there that would be of huge value going forward. In addition to that, I think it could be a really good idea to look at kind of regions and different countries and look at kind of regional contests, show and tells. You know, we could be looking at incorporating business opportunities in terms of the, you know, young people pitching ideas, sustainable kind of solutions to issues that's happening within the environment. And again, I think there's also a conversation in how we could look at immersive technology such as VR and intertwine that with existing EU programs such as youth exchanges, where perhaps if two youth groups were going to spend some time together in person in the summer, we could kind of have a lead-in time where they're meeting in VR as avatars in the lead up to that, where, you know, icebreakers, name games, all of that really nice kind of important thing material can be done in the lead up to an actual in-person event. So there's lots of ideas. There will be even more ideas as this technology evolves and the tapestry of different experiences and apps can be increased for youth work. At the minute, as I mentioned, we have about 12 or 14 apps that are ready to go. I think with that, it's going to get more interesting in terms of how we can incorporate immersive tech into youth work on an EU-wide scale.
Thank you very much, Barry. And let's hear also from Juha some recommendation, ideas, advices, how to, you know, bring emerging technology more to youth work.
I'll go from top to bottom to save the best for last, to go last with the practice side of things. I think societally and policy-wise, the youth field and all youth work organizations and all youth workers simply need to engage more, whether it's on a discussion about emerging technologies like artificial intelligence, or whether it's a new policy initiative on the EU level or on national level. We really need to be more there in the discussions and around the tables. I believe that if we aren't invited, if we ask to be included, then we will be included, because youth work is so valued around Europe as well. And that'll help us to also shape the policy in a way that will help us really experiment. As far as new practice developing in projects goes and new practice developing in general goes, we really need to be better in assessment. We need to be able to better show what the impact of our new approaches is, or or what we learned from experimenting with a singular technology or singular approach, not just saying that we think it was okay, but rather we need to be able to show how it was. Yeah. And when we go to the level of singular practitioners, what keeps popping up over the years, time and time again, the only way that we can future-proof ourselves for the next emerging piece of technology is changing our mindset. So Irina said, stay curious, and that's really in the core of it. We need to stay curious. We need to be aware of our own thinking. We need to be aware of our own attitudes and competences and skills, and all of this stuff to kind of build a mindset that is constantly open for experimenting with new technology. And the most concrete thing I can say about youth work practice is that it's easy to be worried about whether we are able to use the new technologies to the full potential or not. But I would say to every single practitioner out there that you are already superstars. My example comes from Mozilla Festival, which is a huge tech event in London. And once I mentioned that I come from the youth field, I work with young people with digital devices, they stopped talking about their wonderful, interesting pieces of technology, and they want to know more about youth work, because there is really a need for youth work that is happening, and we know what we are doing in the field in terms of youth work. So even if we struggle a bit with the technology piece, it doesn't matter, because it will be golden anyway, because we have the core, the important bits, so the youth work is already there. So don't fret, just experiment with whatever comes our way and have fun. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Juha. Thank you all, actually. And I also want to share one comment coming from Milan in our platform, saying that also don't be afraid to ask young people to help you out when it comes to digital tools, especially when it comes to media, where they already are, as Barry was mentioning from the very beginning of our discussion. So social media, Discord, gaming platforms, whatever, could be a way to innovate your practice, also including your target group together with you. Yeah, thank you again, the three of you. It was really a super interesting discussion, and I would like to, go discussing these topics for a couple of days more, but indeed our time is running out. So it's about time to show, at least have a sneak peek to the graphic recording of the discussion. A lot of elements were shared, a lot of issues, a lot of topics. So we have our boxes, and in our boxes talking about how emerging technology and innovation can have an impact on youth work. We can see, apart from your three faces, also some elements which were mentioned during your different answers. Maybe we can make it a bit bigger so we can have a better sneak peek. Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Limonas. So yeah, fail was also mentioned in some comment that I was reading now by Thomas. We need to fail to learn how to do things better. The ethical level of AI and help understanding the needs of young people, as also was now being mentioned by Juha in the end. It's also a matter of assessing if we are really doing the right thing in the right moment, and not only, yeah, it kind of looked good for us. Multi-user platform and growing of skills and AI literacy. So start practicing, start building up your own literacy, and have a lot of resources that we shared in terms of links and platforms to do so, and then experimenting and transform experience into long-term practices to make your project more sustainable when the project ends. Think how to make it live beyond the arc of life of the funding and so on. Evolve, adapt, create, and fail again. Fail and learn from your failing, how to fail better next time, and better until you make it. So thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dace, for the graphic recording. Now, again, my big thank you to the three of you for what you shared. We have now the whole series of our previous appointments here. It's been quite a long ride, I would say. And all the articles and the edited videos for each of these 6 panel discussion regarding these different topics: understanding the digital transformation, digital inclusion and participation, sustainability, well-being, ethics and digital rights, and today, emerging technologies and innovation, will be soon available on these platforms. So the participation pool and the Facebook pages of Salto Participation and Information and Salto Inclusion and Diversity. That said, I want to pass again the floor to Juha, which it was mentioned already. It's now getting in charge of introducing the new, fresh new, brand new Salto Digital, which is bringing even more insight regarding the digital transformation of youth work to the whole community. So please, Juha, explain us a bit better what's going to be this new Salto Digital and what's being your role and what's going to happen there, please.
Yeah, I will be fairly brief also to the fact that what is going to happen is still a lot in the air. We've been around at this point for around 4 months. We started late last year with my colleagues, and only this week we actually have a full team of 3. But we are indeed one of the Salto centers appointed by the European Commission around these different topics around Europe, and we are one of the 11 Salto centers. And as country mentioned in the beginning, we will be taking the taking the torch on digital transformation priority and how it is seen in the European youth programs. We are of course really happy of all the work that has been done, kind of also unofficially in a way with Salto PI, because it was not in the original mandate, but as they said at one point that someone had to do it, and we are really happy that they did share their expertise on the topic, and will surely keep collaborating in the future if their new adventures don't keep them totally away from the digital priority. Now we will be working mostly with national agencies. So if you are expecting immediately another really cool training course like this one, I will have to disappoint you. But we do hope that we can support national agencies in implementing new projects around digitalization in the near future. And I know there are a lot of interesting things already floating around, and with this really kind of combined approaches as well. For example, one national agency is considering a project around digital approaches for Erasmus Solidarity Corps volunteers, so bringing more digitalization into that scene as well. So I'm sure that a lot of interesting things will happen and continue to happen, and we can really kind of get a grasp into these emerging technologies. And one thing that we will surely be exploring a lot also in Salto Digital is how the digital priority in the program interfaces with other priorities, like, for example, inclusion. How do we look at digital inclusion, or how do we look at sustainability versus technology? All of these kind of really interesting and really deep topics as well to explore. And one way we'll be doing that is everyone has to have their own webinar series, so we have one as well. We have Salto Digital Dialogues. First 2 episodes are already on YouTube in case you want to watch them, and they will become there as we have them once a month. So this month we're talking about competences. Next month we're talking about gaming. Then we are talking about digital inclusion, etc. So there's really a lot to dig in there as well. And hopefully we will also have really a good spot again between policy and practice, in the sense that the Commission of course expects us to help national agencies implement policy into the field, but also we can act as the advocate for all the organizations in the field for better policies as well. So you can find us online, and you can contact us also with anything you want to pass on up the chain. So we are happy to work with everyone in the field. Looking forward to where all this goes.
Thank you very much, Juha, also for sharing with us what is brewing there in the new Salto Digital Resource Center. And now I would ask you to give a little bit of celebration to our team as well. So I'm calling all the team with me online, Enrique and Kadri, and maybe also, yes, Maya and Limonas if possible, and that's it. Because, as we said, this is the last appointment of our series of online discussion. We started at the end of September. It's now the end of March. It's been, as I was mentioning, quite a ride. And I'm very happy that we made it so far, I think also with a kind of very valuable impact in terms of what we produced and shared, but that's up to you. So please let us know in the comment. And I don't know how to do it. Let's do it all together, but let's find a way to say, thank you, everybody, and see you soon. Maybe at my count of 3. Let's do it. 1, 2, 3. Yay! Thank you.
Yay!
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you
Thank you.
soon. Bye bye.
Bye.